Alright, it's time to rank another soundtrack, and this time I'm going to be doing Sonic 3D Blast on the Sega Genesis. Like always, I'm just doing the stage themes, and there are 7 zones, 2 stages each, so 14 different songs total to rank, although because, like in Sonic 3 and Sonic and Knuckles, most of the time the 2 different songs of the same zone are basically the same song but different versions, and they're not different enough to keep them separated from the rest of the pack, so for the most part, an act will be cobbled together, and I'll basically just talk about both songs simultaneously, although there is an exception, but we'll get to that when we get into the ranking. But before we do, I'll preface this like I normally do by saying that this list is just strictly my opinion, completely subjective. Feel free to leave your comments and thoughts. I encourage discussion and debate, just respect my and everybody else's opinions as well. So without any further ado, let's get on with the list. Number 14, Panic Puppet Zone Act 1. The intro starts things off well enough, but then, I don't know, this lead riff when the beat drops is kinda bleh to me. The next section is a little bit better, but the whole song just feels like an unfinished throwaway. The only weak song in the soundtrack. At number 13, Spring Stadium Zone Act 2, and number 12, Spring Stadium Zone Act 1. Much like the level, the song combines elements of Spring Yard Zone and Casino Night Zone from Sonic's 1 and 2, respectively, mainly Casino Night. It's not a blatant rewrite or anything, but it is the same style and shares some of the same instrumentation. It's a decent little tune, but it doesn't really go anywhere. It kind of stays in the same place. Not that it's repetitive, you're not hearing the same riff over and over or anything like that, it's just that it never really changes direction. Act 2 does have a goofy little intro and more variety with the accents that are thrown in there, but they're more distracting than anything because they're mixed out front for some reason instead of in the background. So between that and the production overall being better, I'm giving the edge to Act 1 here. Number 11, Green Grove Zone Act 2, and number 10, Green Grove Zone Act 1. This follows the formula of an upbeat, uplifting vibe for the first stage in a Sonic game. It's no Green Hill or Emerald Hill, but it's a catchy little tune in its own right. I like how, after the second section, it sounds like it's looping back to the beginning, but you can tell it's actually a different variation of the first verse, and then it goes back into it later. I like when songs mess with you like that. Act 2 is almost the same as Act 1, but it does include a longer intro that sounds completely different from Act 1's, and there's an extended section at the end of the loop that acts as a solo. So there's really more content in Act 2, but I give the edge to Act 1 due to the instrumental choices. Act 2 sounds more like a demo, even though there's more going on. At number 9, Gene Gadget Zone Act 2, and number 8, Gene Gadget Zone Act 1. This one's full of energy. It's busy as hell, there's no space whatsoever, and I know that's not saying much because a lot of the soundtrack is very full like that, but even by 3D Blast standards, this one leaves no empty spots. But none of the instruments are getting in the way of each other either. It all sounds very cohesive and flows nicely. The main riff in the first verse is quite catchy, and toward the end, the lead synth does this cool climb towards the climax, and it transitions so seamlessly to the beginning that you would think it was just a whole new section. Act 2 is just a slightly inferior version of Act 1. It just sounds like a demo version similar to Green Grove. Number 7, Panic Puppet Zone Act 2. I was very pleased to hear that Panic Puppet Act 2 sounded nothing like Act 1. It changes moods so many times too, and I don't mean it changes when going into a new section. I mean, there are multiple sections, but the mood changes that I mentioned happen several times in each section. It's up-tempo all throughout, but it wavers between being dark, peaceful, and unsettling all at any given moment. And I think that's mainly due to the contrast between the sounds of all the instrumentation. A lot of the soundtrack has a lot of different sounds working together in a given song, but this might be the one with the most variety. Number 6, Volcano Valley Zone Act 1, and number 5, Volcano Valley Zone Act 2. This is one of the rarer examples of Act 2 being superior to Act 1. I do like the percussion in Act 1. There are some nice grooves going on, which fills out the song quite a bit, but Act 2 just has cleaner production, while still being more ominous at the same time. Again, a lot of times it all comes down to the instrumental tones that are chosen, and the way the audio is mixed, and that comes into play with Volcano Valley. I like the contrast though between the two acts, rather than one sounding like a demo version of the other. This time it's a much different arrangement between the two, especially with how it plays into the story of the level, where Act 1 is taking place during the eruption, and Act 2 is the aftermath. Really good shit. Number 4, Rusty Ruin Zone Act 2, and number 3, Rusty Ruin Zone Act 1. There's a recurring riff that you hear played over and over again through about 75% of the loop, and you might think just based on that information alone that this would be a repetitive song as a result. But first off, that riff is a goddamn earworm and doesn't get tiring no matter how many times it's played in a row. And secondly, after the main verse, the riff falls back into the background and just becomes a part of the rhythm section, while the lead synths that come in go into what could be almost described as a long melodic solo. Because while the main riff is repeating itself in the background, the leads are doing anything but repeating. Not to mention that the tones are changing up every couple of measures. On top of that, you've got some sweet accents being sprinkled throughout. Act 2 is a slightly slower, stripped-down version. The recurring riff isn't played much, which may be more pleasing to you if you think it was overplayed in Act 1, but I like Act 1's collage of sounds just doing a dance in my ears a lot more. Finally, number 2, Diamond Dust Zone Act 2, and number 1, Diamond Dust Zone Act 1. It's a nice combination of catchy, bouncy pop with a whimsical flavor on top of it. The warm synth with sustained notes has some great chord progressions, and it's a nice contrast to the stabby, bright sequences in the background. Act 2 is the same song structurally, but the bright, stabby tones are actually now doing the parts that the aforementioned warm string synth was doing in Act 1. Like many of the earlier examples where the two acts are different versions of the same song, the second act isn't quite as strong, but I like how they flip-flop the instrumentation. I gotta say that third verse toward the end of the loop in Act 1 is fucking beautiful. So that's it for this list. Here's a quick recap. Number 14, Panic Puppet Act 1. Number 13 and 12, Spring Stadium. Number 11 and 10, Green Grove. Number 9 and 8, Gene Gadget. Number 7, Panic Puppet. 6 and 5, Volcano Valley. Numbers 4 and 3, Rusty Ruin, and numbers 2 and 1, Diamond Dust. So that's it for this list. What did you think of it? What do you agree with, disagree with? How would you stack these in your ranking? Feel free to leave those comments in the comments. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.